Good afternoon. I now call the Rocklin Unified School District Board of Education study session for Wednesday, April 27th, 2020 to order. Brenda, will you please call the roll?
Rick Miller, Julie Hupp,
Here.
Derek Counter, Tiffany Sathoff,
Here.
Rochelle Price.
Here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Superintendent Stock, will you please start off our study session with agenda item 3.1, Math Improvement, Learning Recovery, Mid-Year Data Metrics.
President Price, trustees, want to just acknowledge that we have trustee Derek Counter who will be listening in from Chicago. He is there on business, that day job. And then we also trustee Miller, he had a flight from Los Angeles delayed and will be joining us partway through the workshop. And so so you're aware of those logistics. I want to again thank the board for taking time from their busy schedules, and also thank you to our teachers and principals who are here with us for taking the time to share their learning and about with their students after a long day of teaching and running schools. And also we want to thank Beth Davidson for spending her birthday with us this evening. We've managed yet again to have a board study session on key staff presenting's birthday, and so we appreciate that. As well. This study session is a direct result of the board setting as a top priority the improvement of math learning in our school district, and the wisdom of the board of setting this as a multi-year goal focused on solid, sustainable changes, not just in how we improve mathematics learning, but how the system learns to continually improve itself, in the board being focused not on quick fixes, but to have in short-term unsustainable goals, but having the vision to set, a multi-year, enduring, sustainable changes to improve mathematics instruction and to provide the resources and encouragement for this work, which is critical to the work being successful. Trustees, I'm very proud of the work and the learning in our system over the past year, especially given that it's been, a most unusual year again. But most importantly, the impact that I know you've seen and I've seen in classrooms on our students. Tonight we'll hear an update on the metrics related to student growth and math achievement, but more importantly from the teachers and principals on the ground working to improve math learning in our classrooms. And with that, I'll turn it over to Director Beth Davidson.
Thank you. Good afternoon, President Price, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Stock. We are thrilled to be here with you today, as Superintendent Stock mentioned, to provide an update on our progress and goals related to math improvement, and also to hear from our site teams. For our teachers who are part of our math steering committee, we have 4 elementary teachers this evening and 4 secondary teachers and their site principals who will be sharing their learning with you and thoughts about next steps. So we're very excited for you to have an opportunity to talk with them so that they can share their learning. And just a huge thank you to all of our teachers out there. We know it's been a tremendously difficult past 2 years, and we just can't thank them enough for all of their efforts, especially a shout out to our learning recovery teachers who stepped up and tried a new program this year to tackle students who are at most need of our support. And then also a thank you to, we have quite the lineup here this evening, so I just wanted to provide a little bit of context. So we have Kylie Bray and Amanda Bannister, our program specialists in curriculum and instruction, joining us this evening. They have provided a tremendous support to a quick turnaround on this data for you this evening. And so with Director Anderson and our 2 instructional coaches, Nell Hildebrand and Danielle Martling, it has truly been a team effort, and we had to divide and conquer a little bit. So I think it's helpful to have a wealth of resources as you have questions that we can answer them with as much detail as possible this evening. A reminder of our goals. We have both short and long-term goals in the area of math improvement, and tonight's focus will be on our short-term and annual goals. So as a reminder, our goal was for 85% of students to meet or exceed their growth target in the area of mathematics. For grades 3 through 8, our measurement tool is the MAP assessment. And for grades 9 through 12, we'll be using the IXL diagnostic. One important note, we are not going to report on our long-term goal at this point because our metric there is CASP, so our state assessment, and we're not clear on when those data results will come. If we get some preliminary results, we could share those at the June meeting that we have upcoming. If not, we certainly could share that information over the summer or early fall. However, I did want to highlight that we are serving a high percentage of students in our targeted group. So our hope is that that work in learning recovery will support the goal of an increase of 10% of students in our targeted student groups meeting or exceeding standard as measured by the CASP. For example, we have 30% of students enrolled in learning recovery come from our socioeconomically disadvantaged student group. 9% are English learners, and 13% of our students enrolled in learning recovery are students with disabilities. A reminder of our steps in the area of math improvement. So we have spent a year in our systems investigation to better understand how our system functions and why it's producing the results that it does. We have implemented learning recovery courses in both the areas of English language arts and mathematics. We have developed and trialed universal screeners at the K-6 level, and we'll be looking for opportunities to engage in that work with our secondary colleagues in the upcoming school year. At the elementary level this spring, our teachers had the opportunity to experience giving the assessment to their students and then meeting in grade level professional learning communities to discuss if the results they saw were consistent with performance on other locally based assessments and our MAP assessment tool. They've engaged in initial conversations around calibration for grading of the screeners, and then using an equity and access lens to make sure our assessments are as high quality and appropriate as possible. Our work around continuous improvement has included conducting initial PDSA cycles at the site level, consolidating and sharing our learning around those cycles, and you'll hear more about that this evening. Our teachers have also had an opportunity to share their learning with their sites at our April Professional Development Day, and then our Mass Steering Committee met so that they could share their learning and next steps with one another. Part of the decision they had to make was whether they would adopt, adjust, or abandon their change idea, and you'll hear more about that this evening. Our first piece of data is an update to the elementary MAP data timeline in the area of math. So you can see on the far right corner there, that cell has spring 2022 data. So this is for grades 3 through 6, so it's aggregated data for the percentage of students who met or exceeded standard on the MAP assessment. And we are at 66.4% currently, which returns us to pre-pandemic levels. So if you look at spring 2019, you'll see those scores are very, very similar, which is good news, making progress. Our next graph, we will be looking at both achievement data this evening and growth data. Achievement data is helpful to us. It helps us measure whether we're on track for that 5-year goal about increasing the percentage of students meeting or exceeding standard. It also helps us monitor our achievement gap that we see with some of our student groups. And it also helps us have a different lens on our learning recovery program to see if students are making enough growth to move achievement levels. So the graph on the left here, we are looking for students to fall in the blue or green spans, those different colors there. The blue indicating the percentage of students exceeding standard on the MAP assessment, and the green indicating the percentage of students who are on level on the MAP assessment. And we have grade spans here. So the first two columns on the left-hand side are both third grade data. The furthest to the left is showing the fall percentage breakdowns, and then the graph next to that, the bar next to that, showing third grade spring. So you can see what we're looking for is that the blue and green bands are increasing and the yellow and red are decreasing. And for each grade level in 3 through 6, you can see that that's the case. So for third grade, we had an increase in 8% of students meeting or exceeding standard. In fourth grade, 9%. In fifth grade, we had a slight increase of 1%. And in sixth grade, a 6% gain. It is important to note that this data set is not yet complete. We had a really tight turnaround on our data, so we do have a few sites who are still completing map testing, and we can provide an update to this data set in June. The graph on the right is showing similar data, but only for our students who are receiving learning recovery supports this school year. So you can see we have a larger percentage of students falling in the yellow, which is strategic intervention, and then the red, in need of intensive intervention, which is what we would expect for students identified as in need of support. So you can see here similar structure. So third grade scores for fall and spring. So we're showing an increase in the percentage of students scoring in that green band, the on level, and a decrease in students in need of intensive intervention. So we are showing that students are moving achievement levels as they're receiving learning recovery supports. One question that came up from our team, which you may be wondering as well, is why is fifth grade lower? Our team has many, many questions that we'd like to take back to our learning recovery teachers and engage in dialogue with them to make sure that we understand their perspective and can understand from a locally based perspective what's going on with students. However, if we look historically for trends, we do see that we have on average about a 9% drop in achievement data from 4th to 5th grade, even pre-pandemic. And then from 5th to 6th grade, we gain 5 or 6% back in terms of the percentage of students on level or exceeding standard. So we will be bringing that back to the Mass Steering Committee and also to our grade level teachers in order to engage in dialogue about what supports are needed, what training for staff, and what we can do to increase student achievement there.
Beth, are you okay if we ask questions along the way, or would you like us to wait till the end?
Yes.
Okay, quick question, jumping back, and it actually would relate to both slides, 5 and 6. When we're comparing seasons or quarters, is it the same group of students along the way, or is it third grade in 2019 and then third grade in 2020, third grade in 2021? So looking specifically at slide 5, is it the same students, or are we pulling the grades each year?
So it is sort of the same students. So anyone who fell in the grade 3 through 6 band in that designated time period is captured.
Okay, so it's not necessarily the same student on their journey, but if they were in third grade the first year for the data, then they would have been in the 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade.
Correct.
And then just for those listening in, so when we start looking at this map data, is that now student to student? Is that year to year or grade to grade comparisons?
On this slide, it's a similar answer. So it would be anyone who took the test during that window who fell in that grade span. So it's close to being the same students when we look at, so the third grade data that you see there on the left, any student who was in third grade who took the assessment in the fall is captured in that data set. And any student who was in our district enrolled in third grade and was present to take the assessment in the spring is captured in that data set. Our next slide is looking at growth. So a different way to measure student learning. So our goal, again, was for 85% of students receiving targeted or intensive intervention through our learning recovery program would either meet or exceed their growth target in the area of math. So you can see here the graph on the left is showing the percentage of students meeting or exceeding their growth target for all students, so district-wide, grades 3 through 6. So we see the highest percentages in 4th and 6th grade at 67%. The graph on the right is showing the percentage of students who met or exceeded their growth targets. That's the percentage you see in blue there in learning recovery. So we see the highest percentage in 6th grade. So while we didn't meet the goal of 85% in any of our grade levels, 6th grade showed the highest results with 62% of students meeting or exceeding their growth target. And a few things I want to mention here as we look at our next steps and our initial implementation. From the time we last reported to you, we have added approximately 300 students to our learning recovery program. And our initial results in the fall that we shared were mostly focused on support in English language arts because we had a very strong, well-established MTSS structure in the area of literacy where teachers felt comfortable and could dive right in. We had established curriculum. We had screeners that teachers were already familiar with and understood how to diagnose the information that they received from those screeners in order to provide appropriate dosage. And we had established an ongoing training as well. In the area of mathematics, we are just starting. So we are trying to parallel that structure in the area of math. So through this experience, we have identified with our teachers the need for a supplemental curriculum in addition to Bridges intervention, the need for additional training. We have piloted our screeners, which we'll be utilizing to help us better identify who needs targeted intervention and how do we provide it to them in meaningful ways. We do have some sites who have shown a tremendous amount of growth in students. So some of our select sites had between 75 and 78% of students meeting or exceeding their growth target. So one of our next steps as a group will be to go make sure we're visiting those programs and engaging with all of our teachers about what structures we're finding to be most effective and how we might be able to replicate those or modify them in each of our sites so that it fits the needs of those student populations.
I love that. We do not need to reinvent the wheel. If it's working for someone and we can take that and use it to help others, fantastic.
Okay, so similar structure for middle school. So this is for grades 7 and 8. So we have added the spring average performance for grades 7 and 8 is at 57.1%, so a decrease from the winter. A few things to note here. So again, we have some questions we're asking ourselves. Teachers have reported that they are noticing a tremendous skill deficit in students coming to the middle school level. And if we think about this, and we're seeing this on a state and national level as well, we have a cumulative effect of COVID and students who have historically struggled in the area of mathematics that our middle school teachers are responsible for addressing. So we will not necessarily see as significant of gains in terms of growth. However, we still want to look at the supports we're providing, and are there other assessment tools we can utilize to measure student progress over time in smaller time intervals where students are motivated and we feel like the results are a true reflection of what they know and are able to do. So the other piece teachers reported were that the students had significant challenges with motivation to complete the assessment and give their best. Similar structure here, so the graph on the left is achievement data for all students in grades 7 and 8 who took the assessment. A slightly different time window here, so the students did not take the MAP test in the fall because they took the IXL diagnostic so that our learning recovery teachers could utilize the skill-based practice and have kind of a baseline. So we have spring 2021 to spring 2022 data you're seeing here. So the graph on the left, the first two columns are showing from our current 7th grade students what percentage fell in the exceeding on-level strategic and intervention when they were in 6th grade last spring. And then where are they performing now in 7th? And then same structure with the two bars you see on the right-hand side. So last year's 7th graders compared to their performance this year as 8th graders. So we can see we have some slight decreases from 6th to 7th and again from 7th to 8th. And historically, this is a trend that we see over time, even pre-pandemic. The graph on the right is showing students enrolled in our learning recovery program. So we can see positive trends in terms of the percentage of students scoring in the on level, the green category there, going from 8 to 12% for 7th grade, and then 4 to 10% for our current 8th graders. And again, this graph is looking at growth data for our middle school students. So we can see in 7th grade for all students district-wide, we have 31% who met or exceeded their growth target and 45% for 8th grade. You can see the gray band there at the bottom is indicating students who don't have an established growth target because they missed one of the assessment windows. So they were either absent or didn't take the test for some reason, either last spring in 2021 or this spring in 2022. And we know that absences due to the pandemic created some challenges for us in terms of assessing students. The graph on the right is showing the growth for students in our learning recovery programs. You can see in 7th grade, 38% of students met or exceeded their growth target, which does not meet our goal of 85%. So we know we have some work to do there in terms of the structure and support for students in our program. However, it's important to note that this is a greater percentage than the growth of all students district-wide, and we are talking about students who historically have struggled in math for many, many years.
Couple questions, Beth, thank
Yes.
you. On that slide, when we're looking at the right graph, so 7th grade students, 157 in the left column, is that included in the left graph, the 7th grade students of 861? So you're literally pulling out the subsec for us to be able to see, in comparison to all the students, these are students that received learning recovery.
That's
so these-
correct.
Okay, perfect. And then one more quick question. The slide right before, you're doing a great job. I apologize. I actually have some people texting and asking questions too, and I'm looking at it. These are the great data sets. I know we got to look at them ahead of time. Thank you for the great work. On slide 10, am I reading correctly, or do we have any data around 7th to 8th grade? Great to see the strategic percentages moving to the on level, but noticing some trends on both graphs of the intensive increasing. Do we have any thoughts on that, why that might be?
So we have lots of questions, not so much answers at this point. So again, we'd like to go back to our learning recovery teachers and talk as a PLC about how do we get students to demonstrate progress. So I think what they're seeing at the local level in the classroom is that students are making significant gains. Some of their biggest challenges are around the social emotional aspect of learning, because we know that students who historically have struggled, their mindset starts to be established as early as 3rd grade. And so for them to overcome that, first they're working on a shift in mindset and motivation for students. And so sometimes their trajectory in terms of student growth and achievement will take longer to show over time. So we want to talk with them about some other measures we can use to put alongside this data that might show different ways of measuring learning. And then just a reminder for the high schools, one of the ways that we want to make sure we're providing updates on student performance is through course grades, so the pass rate for integrated 1, 2, and 3 courses. We do not have updated data at this time because the semester has not yet ended, so we will provide updated grade data on the pass rates in our June meeting for spring 2022. And similar on this slide, so we will provide updated data so that you can see the pass rate for integrated 1, 2, and 3 courses for all students, students who receive support through learning recovery, and then students who are enrolled in our everyday courses. IXL was our diagnostic tool utilized for grades 9 through 12. So the data here is showing a similar structure. So for 9th grade fall to 9th grade spring, this is only for learning recovery students. And then similarly for 10th grade, 11th, and 12th. So you can see we are serving the most students at the 9th grade level, and they showed the greatest gains in terms of the percentage of students who were able to move an achievement band. In this instance, I think it's really important that we're utilizing the growth measure alongside achievement, because we know that students who historically have struggled and are at the high school level have potentially 8, 9 years of struggles in the area of mathematics. And again, we may see that cumulative effect and some growth needed around mindset and the social emotional aspects of learning in order for students to show progress. So many of these students were able to show gains, but it might not be reflected yet in terms of moving an achievement band. So looking at growth data, So again, this is solely for students enrolled in our learning recovery program. In 9th grade, we have 64% of our students meeting or exceeding their growth target. So again, none of our grade spans met that 85% goal. But for a high school student who has historically struggled in the area of math, we find this to be a significant and impressive percentage of students who are able to show growth. Many of these students are showing enough growth. The prediction is that they could move an achievement band if their level of growth sustains, if it continues. Our next steps, as I mentioned, we have lots and lots of questions, are excited about the dialogue that we can have with teachers and some of the teams that we've established. So we'd like to explore and identify other locally based assessments that may measure student learning and growth in different ways and in smaller intervals of time so that we can provide that timely support and intervention. We would like to provide ongoing training in both Tier 1 and Tier 2 levels of instruction. This is something that our teachers have asked for as well through our professional development committee and the survey we sent out to RTPA. And we know that while we need to provide strong intervention systems and supports for students, it's also incredibly important that we have high quality, strong Tier 1 instruction so that students have opportunities to thrive in their grade level classroom. We have heard the need for additional or supplemental math intervention curriculum, so we will be looking to pilot that with teachers in the upcoming school year. We will be utilizing our universal screeners that teachers have had an opportunity to trial this spring and making adjustments along the way. And our hope is that this will help us better identify and target students in need of intensive and strategic levels of intervention in the area of mathematics and really establishing what are those targeted skill areas we need to work on. We will also be identifying high leverage change ideas from our PDSA cycles that we have started and those that may be able to be scaled up into different settings or including more teachers in that process. And then we'd like to expand our participants who are engaged in learning about continuous improvement. And our hope is that we can engage our teachers in elementary summer school to trial an idea that's really of high interest to them, and that we can come alongside and provide coaching support and professional development for them. So our math improvement journey, we started again with our systems investigation, which included the development of a fishbone diagram and aim statements and a driver diagram. We have trialed PDSAs at each of our sites from our wonderful math improvement committee members. They will be sharing some of that work with you this evening. And then we will be revising and expanding that continuous improvement process or those PDSA cycles to add participants, context, and different subject areas. So I welcome any questions, and then we will get to kind of our round robin format where you can hear from our teachers. We'll be starting with elementary.
No, you're fine. Go for it. No, and then I will after and you're done.
Thank you, Beth. So could we jump back to slide, let's see, on my presentation it's showing 13. I'm hoping it's the same on yours. It's the timeline of high school grade data for math. It caught my eye. I find it's intriguing to me, and it's hard to fully understand. Love the snapshot, helps us see how our students are progressing through math. And obviously this, I'm assuming, would be separate subsections of students, because hopefully our students that complete integrated 1 move on to integrated 2. But looking at it, I'm finding it really interesting that spring 2021 had such incredibly high passing rates compared to the others. What did we do different then, and why is that?
Think about this timeline, huh?
So in the
Thank you.
Yes, in the spring of 2021 as well as the fall of 2020, those were actually the full year course grades, because last year we were on the 4x4 because of our COVID schedule. So what we know is that mid-year data points in our grades are historically lower than end of course grades. And so what you're seeing in the fall 2020 column, as well as the spring 2021 column, again, are end of year, so those are slightly different than the mid-year. So if you're looking at fall 2021, a good comparison, that is the only midpoint comparison on this chart. And so what we would anticipate is that those would grow slightly by the end of this school year.
Because you may have students that have no mark situations due to not completing an essential skill. Whereas a 2021, we probably made sure they met up the essential skills, and so we're seeing the final grade there.
Correct, and they also have opportunity after final grades are posted to do essential skill corrections and make up and have grade changes in those courses.
Okay. Thank you. So how would fall 2021 compare to, oh, I guess all the others are springs. We don't have the falls. So it's a little hard to grapple that. Because I'm looking at it going, I know we've done incredible work, and I want to celebrate that with our data, but I also have to be realistic and look at the real data and have conversation points of why does fall 2021 look the way it does? That's still great, incredible work. How do we make sure that it's still comparable to the others? So it sounds like we'll hopefully see that at the end of spring 2022.
Yes,
You will.
And
Thank you.
a good comparison, I think, will be the spring 2019 data, because that's end of course and it's pre-pandemic. So there are a lot of variables in this data set which do make it very confusing. So the spring 2020 was when students were held harmless. So you see potentially a little bit of inflation in terms of that percentage there. And then, as Hannah mentioned, we had the 4x4 model. So both the fall and spring semesters were showing end of course grades when students had had time to make that up. So that might be a helpful baseline or comparison for us moving forward.
Just one point I'd like to add. So when we report out in June, you will see, if you remember from last week, our presentation, 53 students went to summer school. So you're going to see those as no marks when we report out. But again, 53, and we're predicting, more students this year will hopefully go to summer school and take advantage of that. So those numbers will change as they complete that credit recovery.
So when we're looking at this previous, because I think that's a really important point. When we're looking at the previous year data, those are students that have already corrected those, have already completed credit recovery to fix those grades, correct? Okay.
Can you go to the very last slide,
I sure can.
please? So Trustee Hupp and I have spent all day in labor management today, and one of the things that we committed to try is to better understand teacher impact. So when we talk about, I guess go back one slide, please. When we talk about rolling this out, oh man, maybe one more. There we go. That was one in my head that was last. I apologize. When we talk about rolling this out, expanding our participants, what kind of impact does that have on our staff?
So I think we want to make sure that the participants that we select are choosing to do so, that they feel like they have enough space on their plate. So whether they're not doing a different committee that they're on, or they feel, or maybe they have a change and they're a sixth grade teacher who's departmentalizing, or they're not taking the lead on something at their site, we want to make sure that we're engaging teachers who have the space in order to take this on. So it won't be something that is required of all sites and all participants. We want to make sure that it's organic and that we are being very mindful of the impact on them in terms of human capacity.
Okay, thank you. What's your goal for a number of participants?
So we don't have a goal in terms of number of participants, just that so right now we have one PDSA, at least one, occurring on all 16 sites.
Okay.
So we would like to see, our goal that we have right now that's drafted in the LCAP is that they'd have 4 PDSA cycles at each site for next school year. So that might be engagement of additional participants in a different cycle of the same change idea that they had, or it might be this person's running theirs in their classroom, and then we're going to run a separate idea to trial with a different classroom and different group of students.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So our last phase will be, and I'll turn it over to President Price, to engage with our stakeholders, our teachers, and our principals. So for elementary, we'll start with them. So we have 4 sites. We have a 10-minute rotation. We will kind of monitor how the discussion goes and want to make sure that our trustees have an opportunity to really engage and ask questions. So if we need additional time, we might limit the number of rotations you do, so you're not visiting every site, but you'll have an opportunity to engage with multiple sites. So we will just monitor that as we go. But for elementary, we have Antelope Creek, Cobblestone, Rocklin Elementary, and Sunset Ranch joining us. So we'll start with a rotation of them. You'll be learning about what their change idea was and why they implemented it, the structure of their plan, do, study, act cycle, what they learned about the process, and then what they're thinking about in terms of next steps. And then once we finish with the elementary, we'll dismiss them and then have our secondary colleagues join us. And we have Springview, Granite Oaks, Rocklin High, and Whitney joining us.
Thank you, and thank you for all of your information and work on this. It was great. And thank you guys for joining us. We're anxious to hear from you.
And trustees, we're going to have some district staff sit in on the rotation so we can learn and dialogue as well. So we'll be joining you. So we'll ask that each of you take a different table, and then district staff will fill in around you. So thank you, President Price. I appreciate that opportunity for us. And again, just thanking our principals and teachers who have stayed for the late show to help us learn. And I just, you know, a couple quick pieces and turn it over to you for kind of trustees for final kind of comments, ahas. But this is a sense of wanting to see, okay, when we say the board set a goal of math improvement and what's going on, you know, this is what's going on. I mean, you got a chance to see the work in the system around math improvement, and so it makes it more real, and versus, okay, that's the data, but what's the work behind it? And what does it mean to have math improvement going on in the system versus we just say, oh, we're working on it. You're seeing the really nitty-gritty of what that means in a system to take this on. And so it just, and again, I just walk away with so impressed with just the amazing, smart people we have working with our kids. So that's just my piece, but just inviting trustees if they have any, you know, thoughts or ahas or pieces they want to share as we close out this portion of our evening.
You know, Superintendent Stock, thank you for this opportunity. You know, so often we can get caught up in decisions and tasks, and those are great and needed and necessary, but it was so refreshing to be able to do this roundtable exercise together. And so thank you to all of the administration that set this up and all of our teachers and staff as well. I wrote a few things down that I was hearing people say because I thought it was great to hear how we were grappling with problems, and that's kind of the change agent, right? Of how do we actually affect change? How do we actually, there's not only the results, but also the process that we just went through. How do we learn from this process? And so I just found it really intriguing. You know, several similar goals from teachers I heard: increased student engagement, growth mindset, increased parent engagement. And I started to hear as one of those was affected, it kind of sounded like the others naturally got affected too. So it was really great that as each kind of honed in on their area or their concern, all three of those areas were affected at a lot of our sites. But I wrote down some things I heard teachers say that kind of caught my ear because I thought it's so powerful for a district to have teachers saying this. One, what we just did was achievable. It was teacher-led. I liked this one. I chose what I was doing because we were using it. Let's see if it actually works. And I thought, brilliant. Yes, that's great. Also, I love this one. I learned I could affect tomorrow. And I was able to move my students from low level to high level thinking. And what I loved about that is that teacher shared that in the past, there may be a small percentage of the students that can move to high level thinking, but yet as some of these change agents were put in, this teacher was able to move the entire class to engagement at a high level of thinking. And I just thought how phenomenal that was. No matter the skill level or ability level, all students were able to engage because of these changes that were made. And you know, for me, trustees, my goal was really two-pronged. One, I wanted to see an increase in student achievement, which we saw in many of these groups, but then two, teacher-driven problem solving. And it was great. I got to hear from teacher after teacher say, no, this was an opportunity for me as a teacher to identify a concern in my classroom and not just have this top-down directive, but actually be able to say, hey, can I try this out for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 9 weeks? And can I have some additional resources given and data collected so I can see if what I'm doing is actually working? And I loved that teachers were able to share, this worked and this didn't, but you know what? I'm gonna do another round, and because that didn't work, I'm gonna try this. And so I just really appreciated this process and teachers sharing today. And I really appreciated, you know, it wasn't a board member coming in the room. I gave the example of use this whiteboard, and do it 30% of your time. I don't think that's effective. Whereas teacher-driven solutions, I think, are effective, and we saw that tonight. So I really appreciated that. Thank you, Superintendent Stock, for the opportunity.
I just really appreciated the vulnerability and the willingness to be vulnerable. I mean, especially, we spent the whole day talking to teachers and staff about trust and respect, and I think this was, if more things could be done this way, I think teachers would see that they are trusted and they are respected and they can be vulnerable, and it's okay, and they don't have to fear judgment or failure, but they just get to try it and then judge themselves whether or not it worked, and then if it did, excellent, take what worked and move forward. If it didn't, that's okay too. I think it's awesome modeling for the kids. It's exactly what we're asking the kids so to give the teachers the freedom to do that, I think is fantastic. And I'm so impressed with the level of intelligence and insight and hard work. And I mean, it was really a fun day. And I'm super grateful for the opportunity to do it in this way rather than packing us up and trying to get from site to site and into the classrooms. This is just such a wonderful way to see and hear what's going on out there. Beth and team, thank you all for your hard work.
I agree. It's so cool to see it alive and working, and to see happy teachers that feel like this is manageable. It's they get to use even their own creativity, right? I loved that. Yes, there was a lot of academic achievement, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate that we're measuring, even if it's something really small. I especially appreciated the approach that I'm always impressed with, and that is about the whole child. So when we hear teachers talking about, I was measuring eye contact and listening and giving ownership to somebody else, I was like, can you come and teach this to some adults, right? And I don't mean that at all rude. I sincerely mean that, like, in the kindest way. But really, those are really great life skills. And also that, you know, for another example, the group that takes the whiteboard, and I learned that my strength may be the math problem, and I can't explain it, but somebody else's strength is they can explain it, and they're going to get it wrong, right? And so those things are taught in such a unique, creative way, and I just appreciate the purposefulness that these teachers were about, hey, I'm going to teach this and watch what the other benefits are going to be for students. That's huge. And I agree. After a day like today, it would be awesome to have everyone have this experience, even though I know that's not possible. I appreciate the effort that it takes, and I appreciate getting greater insight into the small little things that they want to do, they need to do, that are manageable in a few weeks. I mean, some of them even said, I could have done this in a week, right? Or I did this in 6 days. And I also, sorry, last thing, I'm really grateful. It sounds like some of you, all of you, were there to help them with the assessments, and I don't know if how that logistically worked out, but I appreciate that you guys were available to do that. I assume it was tricky for them maybe to do on their own, you know, teach, and can you come and count engagements for me? So thank you for taking the time to make that happen for them. I heard them say that they appreciated it, so thank you.
I just wanted to quickly build it. When we came to the board and requested the resources, that was really creating this team of, you know, Beth, Amanda, Kylie, and our coaches as well, because we knew that to have that level of support on the ground behind this was critical, because like the data collection, the thinking partners that they talk about was critical to support this. Otherwise, I think we would not have seen this level. And so that was, again, thank the board for investing the resources needed to actually implement something like this. And also, as we talked about, that willingness to let the system study itself, learn, and then have us look at those smaller sustainable pieces versus short-term unsustainable just to move a number, of looking at the wisdom of that long-term goal. It's clearly making the difference, and is appreciated. So trustees, that is our third study session this year on learning recovery and math, and again, just appreciate your curiosity and your time in letting us share.
Thank you. Is there any, we're going to move to closed session, so I'm asking for, is there any public comment? And I haven't looked, do we have Sandeep in here to know if we have any public comment on Renton? Okay. Okay. Let's see here. So the meeting is now adjourned to closed session. Thank you.